Our quiet week of weather continues across a good portion of the U.S., although we have some minor issues here and there, but no major storms. We'll set you up on traveling tomorrow, what you can expect for Thanksgiving Day, and of course, we will look at the long range here tonight. As always, on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in
West Babylon
New York and Southwest Suffolk
County,
on
Long Island.
serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area with everything you need to make sure you get through this winter. They are Long Island's largest supplier of
Rock salt.
yes, and they have all the snow and ice melt products like Pelado and Mag Ice Pellets and Flakes. And of course, who wouldn't want this underneath their Christmas tree but a 30-inch snowblower in a fabulous color, by the way. No one will, everybody will see you with that snowblower outside. And, of course, plenty of flashlights, batteries, generators, sump pumps, you name it. It's at Omni. 631-756-1125 for the best prices anywhere. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. You can't get anywhere, Joe, without that dot or that com.
yes, exactly. So here we are. This is our good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. That is Joe Rayo on the right. I'm Joe Cioffi on the left, and we are. This is our last show this work week because we are taking off and the weather is kind of on the slowish side, Joe. So I don't think folks will mind too much if we take a day here and a day there, but we're going to make it a little bit of a stretch here. So we will be off tomorrow and Thursday, Friday and Saturday, and we will be back Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So make note of that, okay?
When we come back, we'll be in the gloom of the upcoming Thanksgiving weekend because we're anticipating unsettled weather on Sunday, some cloudy weather, some rainy weather, but at least it won't be on the the only thing that will be getting basted on Thursday will be Mr. Turkey himself.
Yes, mine is continues to be brining out on the porch. It's cold out here. It's in the upper 30s, so it's kind of like it's in the refrigerator anyway. Although it's in a bath of red wine.
Now, what are the chances that one of your neighbors, aka the bear or bears, might not come up on your porch and either try to take that turkey or or do something to it? You say that turkey safe?
Yes, there is no access from outside to the deck. It's basically on a second floor. I mean, he'd have to scale the entire deck up, and then he has to get through two locked doors. Plus, there are two 8-pound weights sitting on top of the bucket. So listen, if God forbid that should happen, I've got two other turkeys in the freezer, so I do have a spare. But I just have to get it through tonight because tomorrow it comes out of there, and then I can prep it, put it in the fridge, and it'll be ready to go in the oven Thursday morning with my cornbread sausage pecan. It's not pecan, by the way. It's pecan stuffing. As they told me down here, as far as it pecan or pecan. The response was, "You pee in a can." So I got the message. It's pecan, and they're local and they're locally grown too, which is even better. And yes, a happy Thanksgiving to everybody that's watching our show tonight and everybody on the chat board. A happy and a healthy Thanksgiving, and wherever you're traveling to, or if you've got family traveling to you, let's hope that they all get to their destinations safely. And you look at the weather across the country, Joe. sometimes on Thanksgiving week, it's a funny week because sometimes we've seen it where there have been snowstorms going on in some part of the country. I don't think as long as we've been doing this show and thinking back, it's hard for me to remember whether there was anything going on in the Northeast or in the interior Northeast. But for the most part, travel day tomorrow, if you're flying or driving, I don't see really much that's going to cause any kind of weather-related travel delays.
No, it looks like one of the more quiet getaway Wednesdays that we have seen around here in recent years. And again, the only fly in the ointment, we do have a disturbance that'll rapidly sweep through here on Black Friday. But that's not no big deal because most people on Black Friday are going to be indoors or in a mall or in a shopping center anyway. But on Sunday, a lot of people will be heading back home, and the weather may not be exactly the best. I'm thinking that we might see, oh, I don't know, maybe a half an inch, maybe three-quarters of an inch of rain on Sunday. So that will be the fly in the proverbial ointment. But Thanksgiving Day proper, Joe, looks great. Lots of sunshine, hardly any wind. The Macy's folks will be able to fly their balloons, and temperatures not too hot, not too cold, right around 50 degrees. So pretty good.
Which ain't far from where it should be this time of year. So on that
No.
note, got the satellite view up tonight on the loop, and there's moisture down on the Gulf Coast from one end to the other, from Texas across the lower Gulf states and off to Florida. It is not really producing a whole lot in the way of rain. Some of the high clouds are up in my neck of the woods in North Georgia and up into the Carolinas. But right now, the Northeast is clear. There's a little bit of activity of clouds and some snow showers up in the northern lakes. Otherwise, you really have to go to the Pacific Northwest before you get into anything of substance. So, look, if you're traveling to Seattle, you might want to just keep it in check with your airline as far as any delays are concerned, because any of the action that's going on seems to be going on there and nowhere, not much else.
And one other thing about today, which is kind of a sad anniversary, is that it's 59 years ago today that President Kennedy was assassinated. And I always, I don't know what it is. You see the date, November 22nd, just like I'm sure many people who look at September 11th, these things pop up in their minds or whatever. And that's kind of it's interesting also that because of the way things have worked out in the calendar, you could have Thanksgiving Day on November 22nd. It was not that in 1963, but you could have it as early as the 22nd, or you can have it as late as November the 28th. This year, I guess one of those middle of the road years when it falls on the 24th of November. And I read somewhere, Joe, where all of the department stores they want Thanksgiving to come as early as possible, which gives them sometimes upwards to an extra week in the selling of their wares for the Christmas and holiday season. So this will be one of those slightly earlier than normal years for Thanksgiving. And then, as you pointed out, we have had in the past some really wild and woolly weather around this time of the year. 1971, I remember, as the year when they couldn't fly the balloons because it was a major coastal storm. And also in 1950, I believe on the 25th of November, the Great Appalachian Snowstorm, actually snowstorm in the higher terrain. New York, it was more of a windstorm. They had some winds recorded or clocked on that day upwards to hurricane force, so over 75 miles an hour. But again, those were the rough years. This, again, is going to be one of those quiet, tranquil years. So we needn't worry too much about the weather in 2022.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I'm just looking at the northeast satellite loop. It's pretty quiet. You've got some clouds sweeping out of Michigan and moving up into western New York. Not a whole lot going on there, and some cloud cover up in Maine. And you can see the high clouds down in the Carolinas. Some brighter white cloud tops moving off the Florida coast. There's actually a wave that's developing. That will be developing east of Florida, but you can see that the clouds are basically moving from west to east. So there's no chance of this sneaking up the coast and causing anybody any issues. Pacific Northwest, as we said, is probably where it's busier, where we've got some rain and snow going on and moving inland and west into the northern Rockies. Down in the Gulf Coast, we have some light rain from southeast Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle, really not really amounting to a whole very much. Some patches of heavier rain off the east coast of Florida, but most of Florida itself, except for the southern part, is fairly dry at the moment. It's a little cluster of showers in southeastern North Carolina moving east to just over I-95. Up to the north, some snow showers north of Lake Erie. I don't know how much of this is even reaching the ground. Looks like it's over Toronto, but not showing anything of consequence there. Also on the upper peninsula of Michigan, very light. And in the St. Lawrence Valley, either very light or not reaching the ground. WPC on their snowfall forecast probability for at least 2 inches in the next 72 hours. Need I say that nothing of consequence until you get out in the west. But even in the west, you're looking at northern Idaho and Washington State, where there's some higher probabilities of at least 2. If we jump to the probability of at least 8, some small areas where there's low probability of at least 8. So we're not talking about any kind of major storm even up in the Pacific Northwest.
And Chuck Cardillo points out, by the way, going back to that storm in 1971, which precluded the flying, the only year that has ever happened where Macy's was not able to fly the big balloons. He says that where he lived during that Thanksgiving, 30 inches of snow. But not this year.
Not this year. All right, WPC on their rainfall, actually on their liquid precip. I shouldn't say rainfall. I got to get out of that habit now that we're getting close to winter here. In their liquid precipitation amounts for Wednesday night into Thursday night, it's mostly concentrated in the lower Mississippi Valley and in the western Gulf states, where we've got some patches of 1.5 inches plus, and the quarter of an inch goes up into southern Missouri. That is for day one. That is day 2 on our forecast. Day 1 is tonight into tomorrow night. You can see that the amount of precip is minimal, again, except up in the northwest. Then let's jump to day 3. Day 3 being Thursday night into Friday night, and less than a 1/10 of an inch covering the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic. You start to get a bit more. There's going to be another wave. It's going to go break out and run out ahead of the main area of rain. That's going to be more to the west. But you can see some anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to maybe as much as 1.5 inches or more, centered around parts of Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana. Then as we jump to day 4, so this is Friday night into Saturday night, again, that first shot goes out. Then we've got new stuff that's developing pretty much in the same place and also back in the southern plains, anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1 inch. And then up the coast we go Saturday night into Sunday night, where the WPC's got a fairly solid 1/2 inch for southernmost New England, back to southeastern Pennsylvania, actually most of eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, down into southeast Virginia and south central Virginia. Into central North Carolina, northern South Carolina, and northeast Georgia, with a couple of pockets of higher amounts. Yeah, this does not look like it's going to become anything really major. This is just going to come in, do its thing. I thought there would be a chance that some areas could see some improvement Sunday afternoon to the west of the coast as the low goes by. We'll see, but Saturday dayside looks fine.
I think of the 2 days, yeah, I would agree with you. I think that Saturday will be the better of the 2 weekend days of the upcoming holiday weekend. I'm looking forward to tomorrow, though, because tomorrow we're going to have sunshine. We'll have temperatures reaching into the low and mid 50s, and might be my final opportunity to get rid of the last of the leaves that are still on my front and back lawn. But it certainly looks like a nice day with not much in the way of wind to worry about. And then, of course, the big day on Thursday, Thanksgiving Day. A little wet on Friday, fairly nice mild too, I think, on Saturday, and even still mild on Sunday, but Sunday will be, as we just pointed out, rather wet.
Yes. So looking at, I'll start out tonight. We'll look at the upper air of the European, which goes back to the deep trough over the weekend and the lake effect snows, and obviously that trough now is long gone. It's lifted out. There's a second trough in southeastern Canada. Never really got down too far south. That starts to lift out, and there's a little bit more troughing tonight that pulls away. We get into a bit of a ridge position for Thursday. There's a system in the northern part of the jet stream on Friday that comes in, and you see that the height's actually lower. So that'll keep us from getting warm here. That's a little weather front that goes on through. Doesn't really do very much. Maybe there's a shower or two or three, and then it goes out. Now, there's the wrapped up cutoff. You see, I'm going to run it back to tonight. Coming into the Pacific Northwest now, that dives southward into Colorado and into New Mexico and Texas, West Texas, and it's pretty wrapped up. It's waiting for something in the north to kind of move it along, and we see some action in Canada moving from west to east. So that system lifts up and moves pretty much right on top of us on Sunday, and then out it goes. And then after that, next week, there's a deep trough that drops down in the west, and that's going to bring some ridging into the eastern part of the United States. Not a big ridge, but just some ridging. And energy, I think, Joe, in the middle of next week, we'll probably see some kind of storm system head up to the western lakes and into southeastern Canada. And that leaves us in about 10 days, which is December 2nd, in, I think, kind of an interesting position. I think we're starting to see the models beginning to set the table for after the first few days of December. And the thing to pay attention to, folks, is this big upper high that the models over the last number of days continue to show building up in the Aleutians, Alaska, and pushing into northwest Canada. That is the reappearance again of that negative East Pacific oscillation, which, when it's there, can mean colder weather than normal in the eastern part of the United States. Now, there's some work it has to do in terms of getting it to that point, but it's kind of interesting how this is setting up. And the other thing, Joe, that's of importance too, is the area up in the North Atlantic is showing a tendency for higher than normal pressures beginning to build there. So that could lead to a pretty interesting setup aloft after the first couple of days of December. We start getting into the month of December. I think we're going to get into a rather cold, wintry pattern. Might have to wait until, say, after the 3rd, the 4th, or the 5th, but I think that's where we're going in the longer term here.
I got a glimpse of the GFS, not the 18Z, but the 12Z run, which seems to be signaling or red flagging, and the European also seems to be joining in for the possibility of maybe our first wintry weather system sometime around the 7th of December, a date that, well, I don't know if it'll live in infamy, and I don't know if you want to believe, 15 days down the road, but it does seem to show some signs that we may indeed be turning colder and more wintry as we move into the first week of December, which, as I've been pointing out for many days now, if last year December was so very, very warm, it was in fact one of the warmest Decembers almost from coast to coast, and we had that breakout of severe weather, thunderstorms and tornadoes in the Ohio Valley around the 10th or 11th of December. And I said, it just can't be that way 2 years in a row. It can't be. It's got to be something different. And it looks like it will be if the upper level winds continue to pan out the way they look like they will be doing in the coming next 1 or 2 weeks. It looks like indeed, Joe, I would agree with you that we may be looking at colder and more wintry conditions this December of 2022 as compared to last year.
When you were talking about the GFS, I pulled up the upper air, and I left what I drew with the European, and they match up fairly well at day 10 on the GFS and the European. They're about as close as as close as you can get 10 days out. And those features there, the one in Greenland and the one in northwest Canada, uh, really strengthening over time, and it creates a rather blocky look to things come the 7th or 8th. I think we're going to start to look at CPC's 8 to 14 day forecast when we come back, Joe. I wonder whether we're going to have another one of these maps that they're going to draw where most of the country is going to wind up being in below normal temperatures.
Could be. It could be if what you're looking at, But again, we once again with the disclaimer, we are looking after all more than a week beyond. We're looking at the 8 and 10 and 14-day outlooks, and they do certainly look cold or colder. But when we actually get there, we'll see. Well, maybe 2 weeks from now, we'll be thinking back to what we were looking at today, and maybe even giggling a little bit, like, oh, you remember they was suggesting it was going to be abnormally cold, and never took into account that big ridge that suddenly blew up like a balloon off the southeast coastline of the United States. It can happen that way, but we'll see how it happens.
Well, one of the things I think that lends support to all of this is I just brought up. This is I brought up the 10 millibar in the stratosphere, and we have a full scale split in the polar vortex. One center over Siberia, the other center is in northeastern Canada. It's actually pretty far to the south. And a lot of times when you get these things happening, these splits in the polar vortex in the stratosphere, it takes about 10 days to 2 weeks for that to play out in the bottom of the atmosphere. So if you use that timing, we're looking at maybe starting around the 3rd or 4th of December, and then grinding on to the 6th, 7th, or 8th. I think there's the signal here. You've got the vortex being split. I think is signaling that we're going to be going into that colder pattern longer term. And the other thing I noticed today too, Joe, is that even though the split only lasts for a couple of days and then the Canadian center becomes the primary and the model migrates it back up towards Siberia, the one thing that stands out here is the fact that two things. First off, note here all this dark red and brown area. That's another looks like another warm air intrusion that's coming into the polar vortex. It may get attacked again as we go through the month of December. We'll have to see if that holds. But the polar vortex has this really stretched out look with this trough that's hanging down more in the eastern part of the United States, and it's not it has a weak look to it. So when the polar vortex has a weak look to it, it has the probability of colder air getting displaced further to the south at the bottom of the atmosphere increases. So again, there's another sign that what the upper air is telling us, that we're going to see what we saw in terms of the cold. Let's forget the lake effect snow thing for a moment, but what we saw in terms of the cold that set up in the last week or so is not a fluke. We are going to see something similar setting up again. Just have to get through this period now between now and the first days of December.
And I guess with all that snow that's up in the Buffalo area, I don't think they're worried or too concerned about flooding with the system that may be coming by on Friday, but maybe enough to be concerned about on Sunday, because the Sunday system looks to be a little bit more widespread, more robust, if you will, in terms of liquid precipitation. And but also by that time, hopefully with the temperatures, well above freezing, tomorrow and Thursday, Friday, Saturday, enough melting of that snow will have occurred, so it will not amount to much of a problem in terms of potential flooding, again, in and around the Buffalo area with all of that snow that fell this past weekend.
So we've got the surface map up, and as you can see from this afternoon, this is a 6 hour. I'm using the 12Z run. The precip that's in the northwest, the precip that's off the Florida coast and the western Gulf, and the rest of the country is quiet. Some snows dropping down into Wyoming, not much. They actually dry up as a low forms in Texas, in southeast Texas on Friday. Part of that runs out with some rain Friday night up into the mid-Atlantic states as a front drops through the Northeast, and then we wait until Saturday night into Sunday morning when we get this low going up to the lower lakes and probably reforming somewhere there's probably going to be a second low that's going to move up the spine of the Appalachians and become the primary low, which it does. And you got an 84 low in the Gulf of Maine there, right near the Maine coast. It's rain everywhere, by the way, all the way up into northern New England, and maybe a little bit of snow at the end up in northernmost Maine. And after that low pulls out, more energy coming in from the west, and you see a low dropping down into the California early next week with rain and heavy snow, moving from Washington and Oregon down into California, Nevada, and Utah and Colorado. And that low looks like it's destined to go up into the western lakes, which is what you would expect. We're kind of in a bit of a ridge position here in the east, but there's a nice little low there, maybe some big snows for parts of the plains, perhaps the northern plains, and the western lakes if this materializes. And then once that goes by, then you start to see the model beginning to trend colder and colder. And by the time we get to the end of the period, you see this big high coming down. This is around day 11 and 12, where this high comes down and cold air spreads across much of the eastern part of the United States. And of course, let's not jump up and down over the low that's off the Jersey coast with snow in the northeast on the 384 hour, because we know it's already gone on the next run. But the interesting thing to me on the 18Z, Joe, is the fact that it's pretty much the same with the thing to the lakes. Maybe it's a little further east, but that's really not going to matter. Maybe we get some showers here Wednesday and Thursday of next week, perhaps. Perhaps some lead precip coming in on Wednesday. Front comes through Thursday. Then we just sort of sit back and wait. And on this run, this brought down a really cold shot of air. It's got the 516 thickness, 516, 510, 498 thickness, Joe, on December 6th, touching northwest New Jersey.
Right, and as I said some minutes ago, and taking a quick look at the long range of the GFS, that apparently, at least on the 12Z, is what is being targeted, the date of December 7, targeting for the potential of the first real wintry weather system, a winter storm maybe, for parts of the Northeast on that day. So if you've been counting down or counting off the time for when we may see the first measurable snowfall, the first snowfall where there should be enough or could be enough to shovel, that might be the time. And a 498 thickness, Joe, certainly is cold enough to supply the one part of the recipe for creating a snowfall here in the Northeast and in our part of the country.
Anthony Orr is our hits the super chat tip jar. Thank you, Anthony. And I think we had Joe Lopresti hitting a super chat as well. Thanks to both of you, and a happy Thanksgiving. Most appreciated. So let's do Briller Jeopardy. Hopefully the chairman is recovered from his bout with cold/flu. And we will continue the next 5 cities. So last night, and of course, everybody on the chat board participate here. We're doing the average snowfall for the month of November. Okay, the month of November for these cities. And we are going to start with Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma. So they're in the nation's midsection. And cold air sometimes will plunge southward. And sometimes that means that with a storm coming up from the south, they may get a significant snowfall. But then again, how many times does that happen or can happen in November? So, it's a funny thing. You say to yourself, oh, well, they're Oklahoma. They're not going to get all that much. But maybe it might be a little bit more than what you would initially think. But
it's feast or famine in Oklahoma with snow. Some years they get a lot, and some years they get very little.
I'll say 3.
3. Okay. Joe Lopresti says 1.1. Anthony Orr says 1.3. Jacqueline Baxter 1.5. Robert Hill cheated. I don't know that you did. I'm just teasing. He says 0.75. And in fact, Joe, the answer is
0.8.
no, it's actually zero point 0.5, which, by the way, is the same for New York City Central Park, zero point 0.5.
Wow.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh, everybody, Pittsburgh.
How about for them? All right, I'll say 2.
Joe Rayo says 2 inches. Okay. We are seeing Christinapedia 1, Jason Schaefer 1.2, Chuck Cardillo 2, Mark G 2.5, Mark DeCara 2.3, William Uber 3, Chris Alley 1.5, Miss Fallerite 4, Anthony Orr, Joe Z 2.5, Arthur Cotman 2.2, Joe Gaffney 2.2, Johnny Sachs says 3. Joe, the answer is...
It's amazing to me how some of these folks on the chat board, it's not enough to just round it off to the nearest whole number. 2.2, 3.1. That talk about being precise. But what is the answer, Joe?
2.4. 2.4. Like now the next city is Salt Lake City in Utah. Salt Lake City.
And they have on their license plate the greatest snow on earth. And I've been there in October, and it was a fairly warm time when I was there in October with Mrs. Rayo. It seems hard for me to believe that they could get much more than I'll say 3 inches.
Well, Anthony Orr says no more, no less than 6.56 inches. Tyler Fienga says 3.3. Chuck Cardillo 1.9. Joe Lopresti 3.9. Jacqueline Baxter 4. Christinapedia 3.4. Mark G 1. Owen Daniel 1.5 inches. Joe Z 4.2. Chris Alley 0.5. Jason Schaefer going on the upside. He says 10. And Johnny Sack 77 says pi, Joe, 3.14. Mark DeCara 5, Frank Riccio 2. Actually, Louis Alessi at 6.7 is 1 inch below. Just a fraction of an inch below. I'm sorry. 7 inches for Salt Lake City. 7 inches for Salt Lake City for the month of November. So the next one is Providence, Rhode Island.
Well, if New York is 1/2 inch, I can't possibly see Providence getting more than, let's say, 1 inch in November.
So your answer is?
1 inch.
Ding, 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 ding.
You're kidding me. Exactly 1 inch?
Exactly 1 inch. Chris Alley hit the inch too. Adam Lowe said 0.7, but you hit it on the nose. Johnny Sachs says 1 inch. So that takes care of Providence, Rhode Island, because Joe Rayo hit it on the nose. Last but not...
Well, wait a minute. Can I reach into your pocket now and get $100?
No, but you get to spin that wheel.
Oh.
Get $1,000, get $1, win $1,000 in a bonus spin.
Yes.
Last but not least is St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis. And what did we say? So, well, no, that wouldn't work. What did we said? Oklahoma City was 1/2 inch.
Oklahoma City was 1/2 inch, correct.
All right. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with Rhode Island. I'll just double that. I'll say 1 inch for St. Louis.
1 inch for St. Louis. So says William Uber. So says Jason Schaefer. So says Rick B. And so says David and Megan Gaynard. I hope I said that right. Gaynard. Welcome to the chat board. I don't recognize your name. Welcome to chat board and welcome to the show tonight if this is your first time on the chat board. also an inch. 1.2 for Adam Lowe. And those of you who said 1 inch are correct. 1 inch.
Yay! 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 Yay!
Yeah, so
Yay!
you got 2 out of the 5 today. That's pretty
Yeah.
good.
On the nose.
On the nose.
Yes.
So, Thanksgiving, which is my favorite of all the holidays, I think Thanksgiving to me is my favorite because it's there's no pressure to go out and buy presents unless you feel pressured to bring a bottle of wine or dessert or something edible. So it does make it a lot easier, and I enjoy it. So I've already started cleaning because Endora is coming. So so
But she likes you, Joe, doesn't she? I mean, she had one idea or concept about Durwood.
right,
I'm sure she likes
Duncan.
you. A Duncan.
I wish I could write. I'm sure it's somewhere on the internet. The list of names. Let me see. Let's see if there is. It's got to be because everything is on there. List of names. Endora called Darren. Okay. Okay. You ready, Joe? Here are the
Did you have
7.
the list?
Yes, there's a list. Would you like to know? There are 7. Okay, there are 7 names that she calls him. Are you ready?
Well, I know one of them has to be Durwood.
Durwood. Okay.
Yes.
Dobbin.
Dobbin.
Delmore.
Delmore.
Darrell.
Yeah.
Darwin.
Darwin.
Darndle.
You're right.
And Delwood.
And Delwood.
I told you there would be a list somewhere. There are 7, apparently. I would have thought there might have been more. Oh, and one other, by the way, Dum Dum.
Dum Dum.
And how many times? Can you guess how many times she called him Darren, which was the character's name?
Once?
No, more than once.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I would think that she might have called him Darren after the birth of, let's say, Tabitha or Adam, the 2 kids.
Right. Actually, 8 times during the entire series.
Really? And that it must have Samantha must have did a double take each time.
Yes, exactly.
Can you imagine the Thanksgiving table on Thursday? Now obviously we'll have Andorra. We'll have Dr. Bombay, I'm sure. Serena, Uncle Arthur, and who else might be there?
Uncle Arthur.
Darren.
Paul Lynde would just steal the show.
Yeah.
He just absolutely, when he would appear like in a bowl of soup or on a platter,
And the thing about Paul Lynde, a lot of people thought he was like a regular on the show. He only made about 12 or 13 appearances, I think, total. But they was so outstanding and so memorable each time that everybody just simply thought that, hey, he's a regular on Bewitched, but he really wasn't. He was just a guest star or special guest star. Well, anyway,
there was
Aunt Clara, Leon Verbitsky says Aunt Clara would have to be there as well.
Paul Lynde was asked on the Hollywood. You know how he was always great with the ad libs on the Hollywood Squares. So the question, I saw this the other day and I just pulled it up because I wanted to get this right. So the question that was put to him was this: pride, anger, covetousness, lust, gluttony, envy, and sloth are known as what? Are collectively known as what? And his response was the Bill of Rights.
The one I remember was when Peter Marshall asked him who had the nickname Old Blood and Guts. And he thought about it for a few moments and said, Barbara Stanwyck.
Oh, too funny. Too funny. Well, Look, everybody, it is. We could go on all night, and I don't think you want us to go all night about talking about Bewitched and other television shows from our very young days, and we're talking really young days. So, on that note, a very again a very happy and healthy and safe Thanksgiving to all of you on the chat board who are here nightly, which is it's amazing to me. We have our regulars here that are here nightly, and it's not just one or two; it's quite a few, and we really do appreciate and thank you for your support on a nightly basis.
I will second the emotion. Let us hope that all of you have a safe Thanksgiving so that we will all see you again early on Sunday morning with Coffee with Joe and Joe. And we thank you both. We both of us thank you. What did I say? We thank you both. That indicates it's only two people watching.
I
More
know.
than two people are watching.
And and for all the lurkers and the occasional folks that watch from time to time, and the ones that come only when there's big storms, we love you all, and
Yes.
and thank you. So we will see you on Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Nighty night, everybody.
Have a great heat wave on Thursday.
Happy Thanksgiving.